All right, so are you ready to explore this fascinating world of ayahuasca?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, awesome. You've brought like a really, really fascinating mix of sources this time around. We've got documentaries, TED Talks, even some anthropological research. It seems like you're like really keen on understanding not just like what ayahuasca is, but its impact on cultures, even like the future of healing.
Yeah, you've totally captured it.
Right.
I think there's a lot more to ayahuasca than just the psychedelic experience, and all of these sources really highlight that.
Right, and that's what we're gonna like get into today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to be like journeying from the heart of the Amazon where this brew originates to like the bustling world of ayahuasca tourism. And I think we'll touch on those ethical considerations that pop up, like when an ancient tradition enters like modern society.
Yeah, I think you'll be particularly fascinated by how the use of ayahuasca has evolved over time.
Yeah, me too.
But first, maybe we should start with the basics. Like,
Yeah.
what exactly is ayahuasca?
Yeah, good point. That'll lay the groundwork. From what I've gathered, it's made from two plants found in the Amazon rainforest.
That's right. It's a brew that's traditionally made from the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, and then the leaves of the Psychotria viridis shrub, and it's the combination of these two plants that creates that really potent psychedelic effect.
Oh, wow.
The Psychotria viridis leaves contain DMT, but on their own, it wouldn't actually have much of an effect if you just ate them.
Right, because our bodies just like break it down before it can even get to our brain.
Exactly, and that's where the Banisteriopsis vine comes in. It contains what are called MAO inhibitors, which block those enzymes that would normally break down the DMT.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, so it allows that DMT to actually get where it needs to go to have an effect.
So it's like the vine is like a VIP escort for the DMT, getting it past the body's bouncers and straight to the brain's dance floor.
I like that analogy. That's one way to put it.
Uh-huh.
But it is fascinating how these indigenous cultures discovered this intricate biochemical interaction long before modern science could explain it.
Right, and it speaks volumes about their knowledge of the rainforest and its plants.
Absolutely.
And speaking of indigenous culture, something I found really interesting was how the use of ayahuasca seems to have shifted over time. Our sources suggest that it was primarily used by like shamans in the past, almost as like a diagnostic tool.
You're right. It was shamans or healers in many Amazonian cultures would use ayahuasca to enter these altered states of consciousness, which allowed them to diagnose illnesses, communicate with spirits, gain insights into the nature of reality.
Yeah.
It was like a spiritual stethoscope.
Oh, wow, a spiritual stethoscope. I like that.
Yeah.
But now we see ayahuasca being used in like a much wider context, especially in like retreat settings. Why do you think that shift happened?
Well, there are a few factors at play. You
Mhm.
have things like globalization, increased communication,
Mm-hmm.
and growing interest in alternative healing practices in general have all contributed.
Mhm.
Plus the emergence of ayahuasca religions in the 20th century, like Santo Daime Union do Vegetal in Barquinha, played a significant role in spreading its use beyond just those traditional indigenous contexts.
Right. And these religions are so interesting because they kind of blend indigenous beliefs with aspects of Christianity and even African spiritual traditions. It's fascinating.
They do. They really represent like a cultural fusion.
Yeah.
Take Santo Daime, for example. It was founded by Raimundo Ireneo Serra and incorporates Christian hymns and rituals, but it also continues to honor the spirits of the forest and the healing power of ayahuasca.
Wow.
This syncretism is common to many ayahuasca religions and really reflects how the practice has evolved, but while still maintaining a connection to its roots.
So we've talked about like what ayahuasca is and how its use has evolved, but the real question is, what's it like to actually experience ayahuasca? The sources are full of these just like incredible descriptions, cartoon worlds, fractal fireworks, even encounters with like insects, snakes, spiritual beings. Like, wow.
It's true, people try to capture the experience with all sorts of vivid imagery.
Yeah.
And while it's notoriously difficult to put into words, every journey is profoundly subjective and unique.
Right.
There are some common themes that come up in people's accounts.
Our sources describe it as like a total sensory overload. One person even mentions seeing the fabric of space-time evolving from microscopic levels to like entire trees and reptiles.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Ayahuasca often brings on intense visual and auditory hallucinations, along with altered perceptions of time and space. Some people feel like they're traveling through other dimensions, communicating with entities, or even reliving past memories. It's no wonder people use such vibrant language to describe it.
Right. It's like our brains are suddenly capable of perceiving realities that are like beyond our normal senses.
It really does make you question what's possible.
Yeah.
And while the visual aspect is often what gets emphasized, It's important to remember that this is a multi-layered experience.
All right.
For many, it involves this powerful urge to purge both physically and emotionally.
That's right. Several sources mention purging not just the physical kind, like vomiting, but also a psychological and emotional release as well. It's fascinating to think about what might be driving that.
It's often seen as a way of expelling negative energy toxins or emotional blockages. Imagine it like a deep cleansing on multiple levels. And in many ways, the purging is symbolic of confronting and releasing what no longer serves us and making way for the new.
Interesting. One source compared it to shedding skin, which I thought was interesting because it ties into that whole snake imagery.
Right. Snakes are often associated with transformation and renewal,
Yeah.
which fits perfectly with that purging aspect of ayahuasca.
Yeah. It's like you're shedding your old self and emerging anew.
Exactly.
One source even mentioned being able to step outside of time and relive a moment before their mother passed away. And this allowed them to reconnect with their mother and process their grief in a whole new way.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's the power of ayahuasca. It can unlock deep psychological insights, helping people process trauma, confront suppressed emotions, or even gain a deeper understanding of their own behavior patterns.
Yeah.
It's not always easy, but it can be incredibly healing and empowering.
And there's a chemical basis for this, right? One source talked about how the structure of DMT is similar to serotonin, a neurotransmitter that's all about mood perception and memory.
That's right. By flooding the brain with DMT, ayahuasca essentially mimics the effects of serotonin.
Oh, wow.
So it might be that this allows us to access parts of our subconscious that we're normally not aware of.
Like opening a hidden door in our minds.
Exactly.
So it's not just about purging and reliving memories. There's also this strong mystical element to the ayahuasca experience, too. Isn't there? People talk about feelings of euphoria, connection to the universe, and profound insights that are almost impossible to explain.
Absolutely. Many describe having mystical experiences, a sense of unity with all things transcending their individual ego, even encountering luminous beings and angels.
Wow.
These can be profoundly transformative, leading to a sense of purpose, greater compassion, and a deeper appreciation for life's interconnectedness. It's like tapping into a deeper level of understanding that goes beyond our everyday perceptions.
It's like ayahuasca is this portal to a different way of experiencing reality.
Yeah.
One source even described it as facilitating contact with the divine. It seems like these experiences can really deeply impact people's spiritual beliefs.
Some interpret their experience through the lens of their existing faith, while others find that ayahuasca expands their understanding of spirituality altogether.
Right.
For many, it leads to a more personal and less dogmatic approach, emphasizing direct experience over rigid belief systems.
So it's clear that ayahuasca is much more than just a psychedelic trip. It affects us on so many levels, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually. But this brings us to another really interesting and perhaps even a bit controversial topic, the rise of ayahuasca tourism. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a great segue, and one that brings up a lot of different questions. It's fascinating, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives people from all over the world the opportunity to experience this powerful medicine and potentially benefit from its healing properties. But on the other hand, there are all sorts of ethical concerns about things like cultural appropriation, exploitation, and the sustainability of the practice.
That's where things start to get complex, and I think it's important to acknowledge both the benefits and the potential pitfalls. So shall we explore those a bit further?
Absolutely. Let's dive into those concerns because our sources really highlight this paradox of ayahuasca tourism. Tourists are seeking these authentic experiences, but by doing so, they may be disrupting and commodifying the very traditions that they're drawn to.
That's the heart of the issue, isn't it? The influx of tourists has created this demand that can lead to commercialization and, in some cases, exploitation. There have even been reports of some operators offering ceremonies without proper training or safety protocols.
Oh, wow.
Which is obviously a major concern.
Yeah, like anything else, when something gains popularity, there's always the risk of people trying to capitalize on it without regard for the integrity of the practice.
That's right.
One source even compared the quality of ayahuasca to wine, saying that some brews are carefully prepared with traditional knowledge, while others might be mixed with other substances that could be harmful.
Exactly. It's a buyer beware situation.
Right.
Anyone thinking about participating in a ceremony needs to do their research. Choose experienced and reputable practitioners and be fully aware of the potential risks involved.
It's not just about personal safety, though. There's also the impact on indigenous communities and the environment to consider. Ayahuasca tourism can bring much-needed income.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line between economic opportunity and exploitation.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
We need to be mindful of sustainable practices and ensure that the benefits of ayahuasca tourism are distributed fairly and don't come at the expense of indigenous cultures or the rainforest itself.
And then there's the whole issue of neo-shamanism, which one of the sources touches on. It's this phenomenon of Westerners adopting and adapting indigenous rituals,
Right.
which raises all sorts of questions about cultural appropriation and whether these practices are becoming diluted or distorted in the process.
This is a really sensitive area and one that deserves a thoughtful discussion.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily wrong for Westerners to be drawn to shamanic practices,
Right.
but it's crucial to approach them with humility, respect, and a deep understanding of your cultural context. We need to ask ourselves, are we genuinely honoring the origins of these practices, or are we simply extracting and commodifying them for our own personal gain?
It's a question of intention and impact, and this leads to another fascinating point that came up in the sources. The question of payment: should shamanism be free, or is it okay for there to be some kind of exchange of energy, knowledge, or even money?
That's a complex question that gets at the heart of how we value and interact with these traditions and traditional indigenous cultures. The exchange between a healer and a patient was often based on reciprocity, a mutual exchange of gifts or services. But now, with the globalization of ayahuasca, things have gotten more complicated.
Yeah, it's almost like there are two different perspectives emerging. Some practitioners view providing ayahuasca as a service, like a way to help people, without necessarily needing to make a living from it.
Right.
But others dedicate their lives to studying and practicing with the medicine and rely on the contributions of participants to support themselves. It's not as simple as saying one way is right and the other is wrong.
It's definitely not black and white.
Yeah.
I think the key is transparency, fairness,
Yeah.
and ensuring that the focus stays on the healing potential of ayahuasca rather than on profit. Participants should understand what they're paying for and how those funds are being used.
And on the flip side, practitioners need to be mindful of the power dynamic and avoid exploiting participants. Speaking of which, our sources really emphasize the importance of ethical considerations when it comes to ayahuasca. They talk about being aware of power dynamics, the importance of cultural sensitivity, and the responsibility we have as participants to engage with this powerful medicine in a way that honors its origins and respects indigenous knowledge. Where do we even begin to unpack all of that?
There's definitely a lot to unpack, but I
Yeah.
think a good place to start is acknowledging that there's often this inherent power imbalance between Western seekers and indigenous providers. Westerners often come with privileged resources and maybe even a sense of entitlement, while many indigenous communities are dealing with poverty, marginalization, and the lasting effects of colonialism. So we need to be aware of this imbalance and approach the experience with a lot of humility and sensitivity.
Which means letting go of any romanticized notions we might have about shamanism.
Right.
And remembering that indigenous communities are diverse, complex, and facing very real challenges. Their cultural practices aren't just exotic curiosities for us to consume.
You're hitting on a really important point. It's easy to fall into the trap of romanticizing indigenous cultures, but we need to remember that they're made up of real people with real lives and real struggles. And their cultures and traditions deserve our respect, not our projections.
So how do we navigate all of this ethically? How do we even begin to engage with ayahuasca in a way that feels responsible and respectful?
It starts with education and self-awareness and a willingness to ask those hard questions. We need to be proactive about choosing experienced practitioners, researching the traditions and lineages involved, and being mindful of how our choices impact the communities we visit and the long-term sustainability of ayahuasca itself.
One source mentioned the importance of supporting sustainable practices and seeking out organizations that prioritize reciprocity and give back to the Amazon and its people. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a crucial piece of the puzzle. We can choose to support organizations that are committed to fair trade practices, environmental conservation, and empowering indigenous communities. We can also educate ourselves about the threats facing the Amazon rainforest and get involved in efforts to protect its incredible biodiversity.
It's clear that there's a lot more to consider here than just the psychedelic experience itself. Ayahuasca is a gateway to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. It's a catalyst for personal transformation, and it reflects the complexities of our relationship with nature, culture, and spirituality.
It really does force us to grapple with some big questions. How can we engage with this powerful medicine in a way that honors its origins?
Right.
How can we respect indigenous knowledge and ensure a sustainable future for both the Amazon and the human spirit?
These are things we all need to be thinking about as we move forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really is a journey, like not just the ayahuasca experience itself, but the whole process of learning and questioning and trying to navigate all of these complex ethical questions.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's like striking me that this conscious engagement shouldn't like end when the ceremony does. Like it feels like something we should carry with us,
Yeah.
shaping how we live and interact with others and like relate to the world.
I think that's a great point. The real transformation, the lasting impact happens after the ceremony,
Mm.
as we integrate those insights and those challenges into our everyday lives.
One source talked about ayahuasca helping to deprogram us from the primitive brain, which I thought was really interesting.
Hmm.
It made me think about like breaking free from those ingrained patterns of fear, scarcity, and self-preservation that I think we all kind of carry around. Do you think there's something to that?
There might be,
Hmm.
but it's important to remember that ayahuasca isn't like a magic bullet.
Right.
It's not going to instantly erase all of those deep-seated patterns.
Yeah.
Instead, I think it offers a glimpse of what's possible, a vision of a different way of being.
Hmm.
But it's up to us to do the work, to make conscious choices and build the kind of world we want to see.
So it's like ayahuasca kind of shines a light on those patterns, gives us the awareness to see them, but then it's our responsibility to work with that awareness and make changes in our lives.
Exactly. It's not a passive process. It requires effort and commitment.
It makes me think of another source that talked about ayahuasca awakening the prefrontal lobes, the part of our brain that's associated with visionary thinking and creative problem solving.
Hmm.
It's like it gives us the tools, but we still have to pick them up and use them.
I love that analogy. Ayahuasca might plant the seeds,
Yeah.
but it's up to us to nurture them and create the conditions for those seeds to grow. And this goes beyond personal transformation, too. It's about collective transformation as well. It's about taking those insights and using them to create a more just compassionate and sustainable world.
Yeah, it's almost like ayahuasca is this like call to action urging us to like step up and be agents of change.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. If it's helping us to wake up, to see things differently, to connect more deeply with ourselves and the natural world, then it's our responsibility to use that awareness for the greater good.
That reminds me of a rather intriguing concept that one source mentioned, the ninth dimension. It was described as this realm where we can tap into the interconnectedness of all things and realize our power to dream the world into being. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a pretty profound concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the potential of ayahuasca to catalyze a collective shift in consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
If enough people are having these experiences, if enough people are waking up to the interconnectedness of life, then maybe we can start to co-create a world that reflects those values.
It's a beautiful idea, but also a daunting one. It feels like a huge responsibility.
It is. But even small actions can make a difference. One source mentioned the starfish theory.
Oh, yeah?
The story about the person throwing starfish back into the ocean.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we might not be able to solve every problem,
Yeah.
but we can make choices that contribute to a better future.
Mm-hmm.
One starfish at a time.
That's a great reminder that we don't have to be like paralyzed by the enormity of the task. We can focus on what's in our control, our own choices, our actions, and how we engage with the world around us.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts. So let's talk about some concrete steps we can take as individuals.
Okay.
If someone is considering participating in an ayahuasca ceremony, what advice would you give them?
Well, first and foremost, do your research.
Yeah.
It's crucial to choose experienced and reputable practitioners. Don't be shy about asking questions about their training, safety protocols, and their commitment to ethical and sustainable practices.
It's about being an informed consumer and taking responsibility for our choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want to contribute to any harm or exploitation.
Right. And beyond that, I think we can support organizations that are doing good work in the Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
protecting the rainforest,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for indigenous rights, and ensuring that ayahuasca is harvested sustainably.
And let's not forget about educating ourselves. The more we learn about the cultural context of ayahuasca, its history, traditions, and the challenges facing the communities where it comes from, the more we can approach these experiences with sensitivity and respect.
It's a continuous journey of learning and understanding.
It is, but shifting gears a bit,
Yeah.
I think it's important to address one of the more challenging aspects of this whole topic, the history of violence and exploitation associated with the extraction of resources, including medicinal plants from the Amazon.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The Amazon has a long and troubled history of colonial exploitation, from the rubber boom to more recent instances of biopiracy, where indigenous knowledge about plants is patented and profited from by outsiders without fair compensation or recognition.
Right.
It's a pattern that continues to this day.
It's heartbreaking. One source highlighted this particularly disturbing incident that happened in Peru. A Canadian tourist was lynched by locals after participating in ayahuasca ceremonies. The locals reportedly felt that the authorities didn't care about the tourist's death because he was a Westerner. What are your thoughts on that?
That incident is incredibly tragic and complex. It really underscores the tensions that can arise when different cultures with different values and understandings of ayahuasca come into contact. It highlights the need for cultural sensitivity, respect, and approaching these encounters with humility and awareness.
It also raises questions about the role of governments and whether they're doing enough to protect indigenous communities and their traditions. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a complicated issue, and it's important to avoid making generalizations. There are certainly individuals and organizations within governments who are working hard to support indigenous rights and sustainable practices, but there are also systemic issues like corruption and a lack of resources that make it difficult to effectively address these challenges.
It seems like the commercialization of ayahuasca driven by tourism is exacerbating some of these issues. There's this worry that the influx of money and tourists is creating a Wild West atmosphere where safety and ethics can kind of take a back seat to profit. What's your take on that?
It's a valid concern. Anytime something becomes popular and profitable, there's a risk of exploitation. That's why it's so important for individuals to do their due diligence, choose practitioners and retreat centers carefully, and ask those tough questions about training safety protocols and their commitment to ethical and sustainable practices.
And this brings us back to that thorny issue of cultural appropriation.
Right.
It's something that came up repeatedly in our deep dive. Where do we draw the line between appreciation and appropriation? What are your thoughts on this?
That's a nuanced conversation for sure. For me, a key distinction is the intention behind it. Is the adoption of indigenous practices driven by respect, humility, and a genuine desire to learn and understand?
Right.
Or is it more about extracting and commodifying those practices for personal gain?
One source put it really well. They said, if you have a group of Westerners in a room, and all of them are Westerners, and one of these Westerners is wearing feathers, and he's wearing a traditional dress, and he's banging on a drum, and he's singing songs that are in an indigenous language, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with this from the get-go.
I think that's a fair point. It's not just about outward appearances or mimicking rituals. It's about the deeper intention and understanding that underlies those actions.
But the source went on to say, what is something to be questioned is who benefits.
And that's the crux of the matter.
Yeah.
Who's benefiting from the sharing of these traditions? Is it a reciprocal exchange where both parties are benefiting? Or is it a one-way flow where Westerners are extracting knowledge and experiences without giving back in a meaningful way?
It highlights the power dynamics we were talking about earlier, and it circles back to that paradox of ayahuasca tourism. Westerners seeking authentic experiences might unintentionally contribute to the disruption and commodification of the very traditions that drew them in the first place.
It's a difficult balance to strike, and it requires conscious effort on the part of both Western seekers and indigenous providers to navigate this terrain ethically and sustainably.
One concept that really resonated with me from the sources was this idea of mutual projections and misunderstandings.
Good idea.
It suggests that both Westerners and indigenous people bring their own baggage assumptions and idealized views to these encounters. What are your thoughts on that?
It's so true. It's like we're each holding up a mirror, but the reflection we see is distorted by our own preconceived notions. Westerners often romanticize indigenous cultures, seeing them as somehow closer to nature or possessing a spiritual wisdom that we've lost in the modern world.
And at the same time, indigenous people might project their own ideas onto Westerners, seeing them as wealthy, privileged, and maybe even naive or gullible. It's a recipe for misunderstanding.
Absolutely. And it's these projections and misunderstandings that can create barriers to genuine communication and understanding. So how do we break through those barriers?
Right.
How do we move beyond the projections and engage in a more authentic and respectful way?
It feels like it starts with humility, a willingness to listen, and a recognition that we all have something to learn from each other.
I couldn't agree more. One source talked about the importance of becoming aware of the entire spectrum of things, recognizing the complexities and nuances of these encounters.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the messiness, the contradictions, and acknowledging that there are no easy answers. It's about sitting with the discomfort, the uncertainty, and the challenges that arise when different cultures with different worldviews come together.
And being willing to be wrong, to have our perspectives challenged. One source said something that really struck me. They said that both Westerners and indigenous cultures are sick, but in different ways, and that we have no choice but to try to help each other heal.
That's a powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
It challenges that us versus them mentality
Yeah.
and invites us to see ourselves as interconnected, recognizing that we're all part of this global web of relationships.
Right.
We each have our own strengths and weaknesses, our own challenges and opportunities for growth.
So where do we go from here, knowing all that we now know about the complexities and contradictions of ayahuasca? How do we make ethical and responsible choices?
I don't think it's about finding like a perfect solution, because there isn't one. It's about embracing the ongoing process of learning, questioning, and making choices that align with our values.
And recognizing that even small actions can ripple outwards and create positive change.
Exactly.
You know,
We might not be able to fix everything, but we can each do our part.
wow. It has been a journey, like you said, and not just like the ayahuasca trip, but this whole process of exploring these cultural, ethical, and like personal dimensions of this like powerful medicine. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it really has. And, I think one of the most important things to remember is that this journey doesn't end when the ceremony ends.
Right.
It's something that we carry with us.
Yeah.
It informs how we live our lives and interact with the world.
Like one of the sources describe it as a process of reprogramming our minds, breaking free from those like ingrained patterns of fear and scarcity that I feel like we've all kind of inherited from the past. But it's not like a quick fix or anything, is it?
No, not a magic bullet. Ayahuasca might offer us a glimpse of a different way of being, like a vision of what's possible, but it's up to us to integrate those insights and actually do the work, change our thoughts, behaviors, and ultimately like our world.
So it's like ayahuasca gives us a nudge in the right direction, but then we still have to walk the path.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our own transformation and recognizing that real change requires effort, commitment, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones.
I like that another source talked about how ayahuasca can activate the prefrontal lobes, which is the part of our brains that's associated with visionary thinking and creative problem solving. It's like it gives us access to these tools, but we still have to learn how to use them.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's not enough to simply have the experience we have to take those insights, those newfound perspectives, and actually apply them in our daily lives. Use them to make choices that align with our values and contribute to a better future.
And that makes me think back to the interconnectedness we were talking about earlier. It's not just about personal transformation. It's about using those insights to create positive change on a collective level, too.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're all part of this intricate web of life and that our actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves. If ayahuasca is helping us to wake up and see the world differently, then it's our responsibility to use that awareness to create a more just compassionate and sustainable world for everybody.
It's a big call to action. Where do we even begin? There's so many challenges that are facing our world today. It can feel overwhelming.
True, but we don't have to tackle everything at once. Remember that starfish theory?
Oh, yeah, the start.
Even small actions can make a difference. We can start by focusing on the areas where we feel most passionate and where we can have the most impact.
So it's about finding our own, unique way to contribute, using our individual talents and passions to make a positive difference.
Exactly. It might be through supporting organizations that are doing good work, advocating for social justice, protecting the environment, or simply spreading awareness and inspiring others to take action.
And I think it's also important to remember that this whole journey of transformation is ongoing. It's not like a destination that we arrive at. It's more like a process of continuous learning, growth, and evolution.
You're so right. And ayahuasca can be such a valuable tool along that path.
Yeah.
Helping us to shed old patterns, expand our awareness, and connect with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've explored so much, from the science behind ayahuasca to the cultural and ethical considerations surrounding its use. We've talked about personal transformation, collective awakening, and the power of making conscious choices that create a better future for everyone.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's still so much more to learn and explore.
That's the beauty of it.
This is a journey that continues long after we finish this conversation. So I really hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives to consider, some food for thought, and maybe even some inspiration to take action in your own life.
I hope so too. And I'd encourage you to just keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the world.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this deep dive. What resonated with you? What questions are still swirling around in your mind? Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and keep growing.